Hi, folks. This is Louis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld Edition, the unofficial companion piece for the hit HBO television series Westworld. My name is Roger Roper. I am one of your three co-hosts. Alongside me is Big D, Dick Ebert.
Hell yeah.
And Gene Lyons.
Greetings from balmy Boston.
And this is the deep dive episode of the podcast where we look back at this week's episode and go through all the theories, questions, plot points, and analysis. So if you are new to the podcast, thanks for listening. Be sure to share with a friend. Be sure to repost on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that fun stuff. And we hope you have a good time here. We also welcome back Gene. Gene was traveling last night. He was not part of our Instacast. So, Gene, I got to start right off the bat. What did you think of The Adversary, episode 6 of Westworld?
Guys, I've been one of the more outspoken critics of Westworld in the last two episodes. Episode 4 and episode 5 both kind of really disappointed me. Episode 6 got the most visceral emotional response out of me out of any of the ones so far. There were some points where I felt that they fell into some old TV tropes and cliches. But overall, some of it really, really, really worked. And especially the connection with Maeve's character in this one and feeling a bit of sympathy for Ford really made a massive emotional impact on me. I'm hooked again. So I'm ready for another 4 episodes.
We're glad to have you back. We're excited to dive right in. We had a fantastic Instacast. Big D, there was a lot of questions that were raised, a lot of new things that were brought up, and a lot of old things were answered. So again, the format of the show is we do not do what other podcasts do, which is go in a linear plot point by plot point by plot point, 3-hour podcast. This is not the Westworld Telegraph. We try and keep things down to an hour. So the first thing we always like to bring up is the title of the show. This week it was entitled The Adversary. Now, guys, what do we think of the title The Adversary and how it was tied to the plot structure?
Well, I think this is one of the more obvious ones. You have pairs of characters that are in adversarial roles going at each other. You have, I think one of the big ones is we see the employees of the park and their adversarial role towards the corporation, whether it's Elsie, describing them as the corporate overlords, or we see them sending in some new observers to do a restructuring. I think that's a major one. Then we go into, the Teddy and Man in Black Roadshow versus Wyatt, or Bernard and Teresa. We have, Dr. Ford and his past. It could be any of those. And one of the ones you loved was Sizemore and alcohol. They seem to have an adversarial role. They don't get along too well.
Yeah, I think Sizemore was it's not only Sizemore versus alcohol, it's Sizemore versus hologrammed conference tables.
One of the interesting things to think about with adversaries is, when you look at a legal system, like adversary is not necessarily always a negative connotation, but in the fact that you've got two things working in opposite directions, but actually making each other better. And there's a dependency in that sense too, like Batman and the Joker, right? But so in all those situations, Maeve versus Westworld, for instance, right? Westworld has worked over years and years and years to make Maeve a more perfect version of what she is supposed to be. And she's using that to her advantage. You see that she's learned to read people. That's what she does. I mean, it's what she's built to do, right? She knows what you want, and she knows how to get herself killed. She knows how to make herself more powerful, give herself leverage, all these things. She knows what people's wants are, what their desires are. And that's a very powerful power to have. Likewise, with Ford and his past is what shaped him. It's what made him. And likewise, he is the one that is maintaining his past in the form of these first generation hosts that he's keeping up. So in all these scenarios, you look at that and it's important to note that all of these characters that are positioned against each other actually need each other and make each other stronger as their bonds progress.
is it possible that the adversarial role here is the park and the mysterious adversary that is trying to take control of the hosts, and whether it's steal intellectual property or throw the entire park's operation into chaos?
I think it is interesting that we're looking at when we first framed Westworld, like if you look at the 1973 version, it was robots versus humans. If you look at even in this version early on in the series, we were talking about where are the battle lines being drawn, right? As I imagine it, and I don't know if you guys were the same, I imagine it's like, okay, so Teddy and Dolores are going to like join their forces and they're going to fight against like the humans, and it's going to be a reckoning. And I think that it's very quickly we're seeing that this is much more complex than that. There's a lot of players and all the players have different motivations. And so this is going to be a very, very, very messy plot line to follow, but much more gratifying than a simple, good versus evil.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all those points, guys. So one of the other things that we've been talking about, and it's been talked at great lengths, is the idea that there's two separate narratives happening, in different years, right? Different eras of the park. The idea that the happenings of Maeve and Dr. Ford and Elsie are all happening somewhere in the future, and the Logan, William, Dolores, that's all happening kind of, before. I have been on the record multiple times. I've received feedback from the audience that, I can't believe Roger's not coming along with this idea, and I've always been anti-timeline. It seems, guys, though, this week's episode kind of answered it, and for the first time, I don't know if it's just because I swallowed the red pill last episode or not, but I'm finally seeing hints and clues and, flashing sirens that there, in fact, are two different time frame narratives happening. What did you guys think?
Yeah, well, I think we see some key little pieces that tell us where this falls in the timeline. When Maeve goes through her first loop, we can see that they're putting up the Hector wanted posters for the first time. When Bernard is down in, B82, we see that the login screen has the older version of the Westworld logo, which was prominent in the William and Logan entrance into the park. We see that there's a point in Lawrence's hometown where they're doing some repairs on a wall that the Man in Black had shot through. So we're able now to finally start putting pieces in place where they fall along this narrative. And it has to be still two stories. At one point or another, they need to have overlapped, or we would see some continuity which would tell us that these could be happening at the same time. And right now, it has to be Dolores remembering a previous adventure with William and Logan. Do you take the same approach I do, or do you think any different?
I was a little confused when Maeve is being toured around by Felix and she sees that big video wall and the logo on there. Now, is that the new logo or the old logo?
That's the new logo. When William and Logan come into the park for the first time and they go up the stairs, it is the old Westworld logo, which is almost like a fatter font of a W.
It's like a fatter font, and then like one of the W's is an outline, the other one's filled in, correct?
Correct. When Bernard goes down to B82, the login screen has the exact same logo, which we've seen now, that the cold storage level, which we believe was the entrance, is now abandoned. It's been obviously some years since it's been in use, and it's kind of degraded. So that would place it back in time. And again, it could be just a continuity error, but
yeah, I thought maybe it was a continuity error in the previous episodes because it was just kind of something in the background. Does this still lend the possibility that Man in Black is Arnold? I mean, I personally believe, and maybe it's just because people have started to, sell me on this idea, but guys, I don't know. Maybe I'm just wearing too much tinfoil. I think there's a very real possibility that William is Man in Black.
One of the things that I've been thinking about with the Man in Black is that, again, kind of what I alluded to before with him having his body covered up, only having his face visible, is the guy's got superhuman strength. He can lift a body up over a tree with no pulley, we pointed out before. The simunitions, which we've seen have basically slugs to them at this point, have very little effect on him. He seems to have reflexes that are kind of beyond the typical humans. And I'm starting to believe more and more that if he is William, or if he is any character that we've seen before, that there is and we've alluded to before that there could be a third option here, that there's some sort of maybe a cyborg thing going on here, that it's a body. And yeah, I realize how crazy that sounds and how I always poo-poo everyone's like tinfoil, theories here. But what if this guy is ahead? I mean, Ed Harris, RoboCop, there's a lot of similarities there.
Well, the only thing is he when he was tied down to the side of the wagon wheel, he needed his knife to cut himself free. I would have expected him to be able to just like kind of jump up, but he has demonstrated some abilities, that you might just say it's adrenaline, but there's no doubt that he is covering up his body. He had a full costume change, but yet he's still covering up almost 92% of his body.
Dick, you shot a hole in my laser arm theory with the dome. You're shooting a hole in my Man in Black as a cyborg theory. You leave me very little to say on this show.
I think some of our listeners might like that. No, but I'm just trying to, as we're talking, I'm thinking it through, because I thought that as well. And Roger had brought up the fact that in the past, he's been, almost the toughest guy we've seen. Yet here in this episode, we see him vulnerable. He allows himself almost to be captured. They surround him and they knock him out and they tie him down. And the question becomes, was this, who he generally is, that when he's put in a situation like this where he doesn't have the complete upper hand, that he's not as tough as we are led to believe? Or is it when he's put in a position that he's not just out for himself, where he has to take care of someone else and defend Teddy, because Teddy is key to his mission? Do we say then that he becomes more susceptible to the world around him?
I think that's a very real possibility, is, possibly Dr. Ford, after meeting the Man in Black and understanding who the Man in Black is, we've heard Dr. Ford say, we know everything about our guests. We know everything about the employees. It's likely to me that he knows Man in Black's weakness is helping other people. That's what he does seemingly outside the park. When he comes to the park, it's his escape. He doesn't, he plays this role of lone gunslinger. It's out for himself. He's out for his missions. He doesn't like to associate himself with anyone. The minute he has to associate with someone like Teddy, he has to protect him, we see there's some chink in his armor.
I think it's important to note, though, that this could all be, as Man in Black says to Teddy, oh, I didn't think you had it in you or whatever, and Teddy's like, well, there's a lot about me you don't know. This could be the Man in Black actually setting Teddy up to see what he's got in him, to test his mettle. This could be a ruse on his part, where he could very easily have gotten out of the situation by himself, but he's letting Teddy kind of discover his black hat. He's the Logan to Teddy's William.
Is that what you got from that? Because I originally thought that, but as I watched it the second time, the Man in Black thinks he's needed, like he has to protect Teddy at all costs. And whether this is something new in his programming, Teddy makes a point to tell him, you don't know me, or you don't know what I'm capable of, as he jumps up and rips out the Gatling gun and cuts down half of, or actually all of the army encampment. So I think this is Teddy fulfilling possibly what he was destined to do.
Well, this is the second time that we've seen the Man in Black comment on a character having, or a host having their pluck increased. Dolores, he says that they kind of like spiced her character up a bit. And now you're seeing it again with Teddy, which leads you to, kind of question, like, he seems to understand that the park designs things that are guest centric, that are specialized, that are customized to the individual. If they're going to give you a custom outfit, custom weapons, it's reasonable to think that they're also going to give you a custom narrative. And in that sense, he may be taking it as a compliment that the park is doing this for him, that they've upped Teddy's, gumption, for lack of better words, to make him a more suitable sidekick for the Man in Black. And if you follow that line of theory, then he may also believe that Teddy was left there tied up for him to find, that this is all a part of a package that they put together for him.
One of the things that Big D, you talked about on the Instacast, and I think you called it the Teddy and Man in Black Roadshow, it was the idea of this maze, right? So if we're thinking of alongside this 2 time frame narrative conversation, we see Dr. Ford, and multiple times throughout the episode, he's looking at the maze, he's pondering the maze, And then, you see the soldier hosts, they capture Teddy. They want to brand him with this maze. Is the maze, and we talked about this on the Instacast, Big D, is there any more thoughts you have on the fact that the maze is nothing there but a plant by Dr. Ford? It's part of his narrative, and he wants the hosts to brand Teddy as a result of this new narrative.
On the second watch, I think it's clear that we get the answer to that question we had. This is not part of the narrative. When he has the engineers in town and they're deciding where to run the canyon and where it should end, Dr. Ford notices that there's a table of men playing dominoes. When they clear the table, there's the maze in the center of the table. He's surprised to see it. He returns to his lab, opens up the old notebook, which we assume is Arnold's old notebook, and discovers the maze. If this was any part of his narrative, he would not need to go back and revisit his notebook to identify it.
Oh, so I thought that was Dr. Ford's notebook. What you're saying, though, makes sense. If he doesn't recognize the maze and he's going back to the Arnold, so he's catching clues that Arnold is somehow meddling with the robots and programming them to carve the maze into certain landmarks throughout the park.
I mean, I think, at first blush, I was kind of tired of seeing the maze on everything. Like, I was like, oh, it's on the table. They're going to brand him with it. It's on this coffin. Like, it's a maze everywhere. And I really appreciated when it was just kind of like this subtle, like, hidden thing. Like, you had to cut off a dude's scalp to find it. But, in the same sense, like, now, framed in that sense, it makes a ton of sense to go, okay, yeah, this thing is appearing more and more as this as the dissonance or the uprising sort of crescendos. In that sense, I think it's actually kind of a really powerful tool to kind of show, if we see this and it come to a head and you just start seeing it, painted on the sides of buildings and who knows, like in the sky, burned into fields, whatever. Like then okay, shit's going down.
So I made the joke during the live tweeting on Sunday's episode, which of the three of us is going to be the first one to actually get the maze tattoo or branded onto our skins?
Not it.
I mean, yeah, I guess I would do. Do I have to do the maze though?
Yeah. Or well, listen, is it the maze or something else? Like, what would you want to do?
I mean, I don't know. I definitely don't want to be that, the chick with the script, some sort of cursive like violent delights,
Oh God,
tramp stamp or something like that.
That's totally happening first.
Although if I had to get a tattoo over my butt, I think violent delights would be it.
I like that one. It's the people who got like the Dharma Initiative, like, tattooed.
That really happened? People did that?
I think people did that. That and also, what is it? The Rainbow, the Umbrella Corporation for the what was it? Resident Evil. That's one I've seen pretty popular around. I don't know. We'll see it. The last thing, Big D, you brought up something during our prep notes about the man in the center of the maze. We heard Teddy give a pretty in-depth exploration of what he assumes the maze is. It's kind of a native story, and we've had people write into us about the idea that there's some sort of Native American tie to this maze. But you brought up something really, really cool that I want to kind of explore.
Well, again, I'm going to paraphrase. They're having a discussion, and he asks Teddy outright. He says, tell me what you know about the maze. And he says it's a maze based in the old culture, and that it's the story of the sum of a man and what makes him. But what's key is he says the man built, a house, and he lived in the house. And he died 1,000 times and came back 1,000 times and built the house to protect him. When I'm hearing this, the only person or character in the show that we know that could fit this bill, theoretically, is Teddy. Dr. Ford, promptly in that conversation with Teddy, mentions, Teddy, you've lived and you've died 1,000 times, but you haven't lost any of your bravery. I can't see that this is by accident. Whether I don't want to believe right now that Teddy is in the center of the maze, but it is quite possibly there's a parallel there that we cannot ignore.
Again, the only other thing that I want to make, is it relates to the maze in terms of predictions. I still am holding out for the idea that it's Arnold. When you talk about the guy who's died and has built up a wall around himself, it could potentially be Arnold as well in the center of the maze. But I like the fact that this show is starting to give us answers, sometimes in a tropey manner, but the execution is still there for me to keep watching and for us to really enjoy this episode. So,
one last thing I want to touch on there with the brand, with the map, is some more ammo to my theory that this cannot be narrative. You would never put a narrative in place that would do damage to the hosts that cannot be repaired right away. You would not do something that would cause the host to explode, host to lose all arms and legs, host to become so disfigured that you're going to have to pull them completely out of circulation and make a brand new Teddy. If you brand a host, if you brand Teddy on the chest, there is no quick and easy way to recycle him back the next day. You're causing such a problem for the logistics of the park. You're forcing Teddy to be pulled out of his narrative for a long period of time. I don't see any way that the park would build that into a narrative. Am I alone in this craziness?
No, that's a great point. We'll see how it all plays out. When you talk about Dr. Ford and you talk about the whole maze here, we learn some more things about Dr. Ford in the episode with the fact that there's a house in Sector 17 that Ford has been hiding from everyone. And, when we learn that there's these 5 rogue hosts that have gone off, they're like originals. The immediate thing that I thought was, oh my God, it's the Wyatt gang. It's the Wyatt crew that's out there. But it turns out, no, it's the little boy that we learn is the younger version of Dr. Ford. I believe we called that like by episode 2 when we first were introduced to him. There's also a model of his brother, a model of his mother, and a model of his father who we thought was possibly Arnold based upon the photo and the story that Dr. Ford said, and also the family dog, right? And they're all Generation 1 robots left to kind of live, and Dr. Ford hangs out there. It seems like, is Dr. Ford really a villain, or is he just kind of clinging on to his past here?
I don't think if it's a question if he's a villain or not. I think a better question is he in control? We saw this is the same man who 2 episodes ago, was proud to display his power over the entire world he commands to Teresa and stop the world on a dime and take the Earth Mover and destroy the childhood memory she had with her family sitting at that table. Now, he seems almost like a lost old man. Bernard has found his secret. He's found what's so close and near to his heart, which was the gift from supposedly Arnold, which is the replication of his family. Startling is that Ford has put in place here some security measures that completely circumvent any common sense. The hosts do not respond to the usual verbal commands, only for him. They're unregistered. And we see and get a hint that Dr. Ford's his childhood was not all sunshine and rainbows, that he's given his dad some of his nasty old habits. He seems like an angry drunk.
I've noticed for a few episodes that there's kind of like this theme that we're not, typically keyed into, but if you really dig and frame the progression of Dr. Ford's storyline, you start seeing a very, very strong Oz sort of thing going on here. He's kind of like the man behind the curtain, right? In the sense that he's got these vulnerabilities that are massive. His missing of his family, the way that he feels about Arnold's superiority, and these needs for petty displays of power, right? Like you said, having them not respond to verbal commands except for his. That's so petty. The upside of it is that you can maybe show off or like have some sort of circle of safety for yourself. The downside, though, is absolutely massive. The downside is that you have robots that basically, if you're not powered or not there, are incredibly dangerous. So, he's showing a certain recklessness that's kind of surprising to me. I do anticipate that we're going to see some horrors from this man.
Do we actually think that Dr. Ford was in the house when Bernard showed up? Or did he just appear somehow as, what the idea of what we see as Dr. Ford is really nothing more than a hologram or some sort of, AI
No, that's a really good point. It's something that we overlook a lot on this, when viewing the show. I think that I'm so taken by the action that's happening that Bernard just got himself into a really bad situation. What the hell is going on here? Who are all these people? Okay, I think I'm figuring out who these people are. And in all that, I never stopped to ask, how the heck did Ford get there? Was he just hanging out there the whole time? Doesn't seem likely. So that's a really good point, Raj.
Well, I think we have the answer. And I was going to ask this also. When Bernard he goes down to see the old system, it identifies 5 unregistered hosts. There's only 4 human hosts in that house.
I took at it that the 5th host is the dog.
I disagree. We've never seen any other animal registered as a normal host. They're just livestock. If you want to count 5 unregistered hosts in that house, Dr. Ford is the 5th.
Wow, that's a big D. That you're laying down a theory that no one has actually brought up. So your money is on Dr. Ford as an unregistered host.
I think if we're going off the sheer numbers, they say there's 5. It has to be. It would make complete logical sense. We've never seen them care much about the animals. So why would they care about it in this case? This one greyhound, unregistered greyhound dog.
It's an interesting point that we constantly are being told through various characters and Dr. Ford himself, it seems, like with the magic and the magician allegory, but basically that his power only extends as far as the bounds of the park, right? That he is, he never leaves there, it doesn't seem. He doesn't have a life outside of there. And so it makes perfect sense, that he could be a host, but at the same time, then why create hosts that represent his family? That I don't understand that part.
Well, no. The hosts were given to him by Arnold, according to Dr. Ford's story. He
Right.
said that Arnold gifted this to him. But he also said, if Bernard, what about if you wanted to build yourself, a host that was a reminder of your son? Wouldn't you want to do that? And I think in a world like this, if I had lost someone close to myself, if I had lost my mother, or if I had lost a child, in a world where I could create cloned, robotic, lifelike versions of someone that I lost dear to me, why wouldn't I want to do something like that? Why wouldn't I want to spend my time with them? Why wouldn't I want to get their personalities as close to their real life counterparts as possible?
But you're predicating this belief on the fact that Dr. Ford would know he is a host. Maeve says it when she's talking to, Sylvester and Felix. How do you know you're real? And he says, well, I'm born and you weren't. It is very likely that most of the hosts, we know the ones in the park don't realize that they're not real. A host Ford could believe he is human. Thus, it would be completely logical for him to keep other hosts as his family reminders.
It's a good point. I'm still not totally convinced that Dr. Ford is a host after seeing this, but I just found it interesting that upon my second viewing, I was like, how did he get there? Right? And then Big D, you pointed out the 5th host, and it could be the dog or not. The only reason that I don't think he's a host, I mean, there's other reasons, but as it pertains to this particular episode, the fact that we find out that Arnold is messing with his family. He's messing with the young version boy of himself. He seems like the Arnold voice told the little boy to kill the greyhounds. Listen, if I'm Dr. Ford, I'm freaked out at this point.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about, that he's lost control. He has no knowledge of the maze, of what it means. He now has his family, who is the most dear and near thing to his heart. And young Robert, not only does he do something that he shouldn't be doing, which was, kill the dog, he then lies about it. This brought me to another thought. If there is an outside force that is controlling the hosts, what good would there be of telling this young Robert to kill the dog? It seems like it's something that a god or an outside party would have no part in. It does no good. It serves no purpose. This is almost to me like when, the football player in the NFL prays to God, hey, God, let us win. Do you believe a god would have time to even care about your football game? What good would it do for an outside entity to hack into the park to have Robert kill a dog? It's making me feel like it's almost like a schizophrenic internal cause and not an outside third-party influence.
I do see two different possibilities here, though. One is a message that's lost in translation, in that there's a directive that's pointed to this first generation host, the boy, that says you must stop anything that kills life. Right, something that's a threat needs to be stopped. It's kind of that Good Samaritan reflex, right? That it's just been mangled in a sense. But on the flip side of it, it could be that. It could be the Sicilian message, right? Like the equivalent of the Godfather to Ford. Like, he's being sent a message, like, you see what I can do here. There's the power from this outside source, presumably Arnold, that I can destroy at will, and so watch out.
Yeah, not only destroy at will, but destroy things that you hold close to yourself dear, right? And so I think he's just trying to fuck with Dr. Ford's head, personally. But, that leads me to my next question here, guys. Who's messy with the host? Is it Arnold? You brought up the idea of there's outside forces. Are there people that, we hear Teresa talking to some folks, possible corporate espionage. We learned that the unit, the GPS unit, and the satellite are actually Delos equipment. So are those the perpetrators? Are those disguising themselves as Arnold? Or is Arnold truly back in the park?
Whenever you're asking the question of who is the influence, you'd have to ask, what would they gain by it? From everything that we've seen the hosts under control doing, it's not clear what party entity it would benefit. They seem to be doing things that would almost just cause chaos. So I think it's real difficult to say who is behind it, because something as innocuous as, killing the dog and what looks like sending a direct message to Ford, hey, I can control your the things that's most dear to you. You then also have some other hosts that we hear are coming off loop, and that there's been changes made to them that have changed their core code and their directives, and they're doing things that they were never designed to do. I think right now it is such a large scope that we would have no idea, and if we guessed, we would be so far off.
Well, what we know so far, and according to our Scooby-Doo sleuth detective Elsie, who was down there at the old abandoned theater, to access the bicameral control system, it seems as if Teresa was logging and sending out data outside the park, but also someone that was logging themselves as Arnold. So, while she's there, she gets attacked. Who's attacked Elsie? Is it one of Teresa's henchmen? Is it someone in QA like Stubbs? Or is it Arnold himself down there that's playing the role of devil?
I'm not sure who's behind it, but I did want to point out that, in this episode I mentioned before, there are a few cliches and tropes that really bothered me. And one of them was the way it was shot from, her entering the spooky looky, old theater by herself, and, everything's dark, and she's just got a single flashlight, and she keeps turning her back to the camera. And, there's lots of, spooky imagery in there. And it just seemed like, we've seen different situations. Bernard going down in a cold storage. He's got a whole security team with him, Elsie going out into the park to retrieve the control unit from the woodcutter. She's got Stubbs with her. Now she's just going by herself, spending a whole lot of time not, on a computer, not looking around. And to me, I called it from about 20 minutes out that something's going to sneak up on her.
Don't you feel that as technology advances, you become more dependent on it and you don't question it? If you are Elsie and you've worked in this park for 5-6 years, you've never seen anything like the woodcutter. You would have no real fear. You're in a closed environment. Granted, it would be spooky and you might get scared walking around in the dark, but truly, what would she have to fear?
The only thing she has to fear is turning on the lights in the theater, right? I mean, everything else is working in that theater, right? The bicameral control system is still working. So, electricity is still being pumped in there. No one cut the power. This wasn't Samuel L. Jackson's got to go out to the control system and repump and do a manual start. She could have easily just turned on the light switches there in the park. But no, I kind of agree with Gene here. It was kind of, an old TV, movie plot device that, spooky. I'm going to only use a flashlight, but it's a futuristic flashlight because it has 3 lenses.
Yeah, and Dick, taking it a step further, you just pointed it out. She just saw the woodcutter. She just saw the woodcutter climb out of a ravine and bash his own head in with a rock. She just narrowly escaped death in her view. And now she's back out there again by herself going into this theater, just like, oh, whatever. It seems a little odd to me. Like they just kind of had to force this scene.
She's trying to advance her career.
Yeah.
She wants to get a promotion.
I understand her motivation behind it. She wants to keep it like it's only like it's a secret thing that she's doing with her and Bernard. So I get that. I bought that. But the idea that there's still electricity going into that building and just, come on, it's a theater. They've got floodlights. They've got all kinds of stuff. But Big D, you pointed something out that I haven't seen, and I'm going to have to go back and watch it again. You said there was a devil on the stage?
Yeah, when she opens up the flap, when she's trying to find where the console is, on stage there is a devil-looking figure with horns. It's a demon. It looks very much like the devil. And I think it's just funny when the juxtaposition to the control panel, which is playing God. Ford has said it many times, you can't know God without the devil being right there, without knowing the devil. So I thought having those two, objects in frame, that could totally explain why it was shot in the dark, why it was Scooby-Doo, that it was less about, being logical and more trying to present those two ideas in an environment that was kind of more suited to it.
I just hope it's not a velociraptor that got Elsie. When you talk about the data that's being smuggled out, who's helping Teresa? So the person we do know that is behind this is Teresa. She seems to be working either with the Delos Corporation or possible some other company led by the Chinese. Guys, this is something we're seeing more and more in American cinema and in American movies is the evil Chinese. Unless it's a movie that's going to be shown in China, like Transformers, then it's all, Chinese are our friends. But, in these type of situations, the idea that the Chinese are going to poach intellectual property and do their own thing is this Delos behind this, or is this a nefarious outside Chinese corporation that's coming in to steal secrets and build their own Westworld Beijing?
I think you're making some assumptions there that are kind of could be way off base. Why are you assuming that Delos is not a Chinese-owned corporation? Number one. She could be talking to corporate headquarters. And also, you're led to believe here that Teresa is the mole. I think Teresa makes a perfect patsy. If you want to set somebody up to take the fall for this, she could very well be innocent. Bernard seems to think that she's innocent in this. If you wanted to have somebody, you've already heard Elsie say, the first one to go down for this is going to be Teresa. So if she's going down, why not just give her a push?
I think Bernard is just blinded by love. I think I felt so bad for Bernard. Like, his son passed away. He's away from his wife. There's spent, long, lonely nights. Stuff's not going so well for him at work. All these narratives are all out of place. His mentors being distant and cold and keeping things from him. And his one thing that he could really look forward to was, going, those late night jammy jam sessions with Teresa. Now she's turned a cold shoulder to him. I felt really bad. So listen, I just think that Bernard's looking through some rose colored glasses.
It's okay. They'll just wipe him anyway, and he'll forget all about it. So it'll be fine.
That's right. So the other character that we're introduced to, and I think Big D, did you call this or did Gene call this? There was going to be an unknown character yet that was actually going to be the representative sent from Delos.
I don't necessarily believe that this is the rep that Dr. Ford is mentioning. Dr. Ford is almost proud to show that he has some knowledge that Teresa doesn't have about an outside rep coming in. This rep, she is, what was her position again?
According to my notes, she was an executive director of the board from Delos, Charlotte Hale.
Yeah, she seems to be coming in, she mentions, to do some restructuring. I don't think this is the same person that Dr. Ford was talking about.
I just kept waiting for Charlotte to ask, Sizemore, so what is it that you do around here? Actually, I think she does ask that question of Sizemore. Correct me if I'm wrong. But no. So you're thinking that Charlotte is actually a plant. She's on team Teresa.
I think Charlotte has definitely been brought in to look at what's going on. And she could have been definitely called in as some reserve, as some help by Teresa. If Teresa's threatened by Ford, that Ford says, don't question me. He threatens her with the knowledge of her and Bernard. What would she do? Any smart woman, any smart man, any smart businessman would protect themselves. You, number one, cut off Bernard. You remove that piece of leverage from the equation. And number two, he's unstable. We've already had multiple staff say he's unstable. Bring in some from the board who can see him being unstable, spending tons of money, redoing a narrative, throwing the entire park into chaos. If she wants to stay in control and she sees him as a direct threat, bringing in the consultant from the board would be a perfect way to do it.
Yeah, but I don't think that, I personally still believe that I'm doing Occam's razor here, guys. I think that Charlotte is the representative. I think Ford knew about it before Teresa. And he basically said, like, listen, you can bring all the people you want. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm Dr. Ford. I'm in total control. I can, stop everything with a wave of my finger. Like, bring it on, right? That was that whole power lunch that he had. And so I think that he knew that Teresa was up to no good. I think he knew all of that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Well, one host that's definitely been modified and we just grow to love each episode is Maeve, played by Tandy Newton. We see her using her unlocked power to continually go back down into the butcher shop, so to speak, with her friends Felix and Sylvester, so that she can continually learn more about her existence. To the point now where she is blackmailing them to adjust her attributes.
I kind of had a hard time with this part. So I understand Felix is enamored, and they establish that with the fact that he's trying to reanimate this bird, that he's got this good heart to him, a good nature to him, and that he wants to do the right thing, right? He has a great amount of sympathy for Maeve. And he's fascinated by her. And it doesn't seem to be that it's seated in any sort of a dark ulterior motive. Like, he doesn't seem that he's trying to sexually exploit her, even though he might be in love with her in a sense. But what's troubling about it, though, is that I feel like that progressed way too quickly. The show is very careful to make everything else progress in a time frame that makes sense, right? Very gradual steps between alliances, very gradual steps between enemies, very gradual steps between romance, and I don't understand how they forced this one so quickly from him turning around and seeing her again. Now, we're not sure that this is entirely linear, but it felt, even for the progression for the audience, that it just felt like a very, very quick turnaround. And then with Felix, and then with Sylvester, even more so. We kind of talked before about Elsie and not being accustomed to the idea of this technology becoming hostile. Well, Sylvester should not believe that. I mean, again, they don't have restraints on these hosts when they're operating on them. In this situation, I would like to think that he would just be like, okay, well, this thing can't hurt me. It's like a bad dream. As we've seen that restraint shown in interview scenes with Abernathy, in scenes with other hosts that kind of went haywire. So I'm a little confused by that.
Well, I think they explain this fairly logically. When they're showing Maeve's personality matrix, she is specifically designed to seduce. She is designed to be more intelligent than most. Her skill set would be perfectly suited to flipping Felix.
Yeah, I agree. But with Sylvester, she pulls a scalpel on him, and that somehow works.
She's not so much seducing him, but she's using her cunning and her other skill set to blackmail him.
I guess in that sense, though, if I were working on a computer at the office and the computer was like, hey, I noticed you like to play games. You don't want the boss to find out that you're playing games, right? You better make a deal with me and give me access to these other networks. I'd be like, well, something's wrong with this computer. We better fix it now.
Or if your computer said, hey, by the way, I've already staged emails to your entire family with your entire Google search history and all those emails and sites you've gone to. You'd have to believe that Maeve has true leverage on him.
So the one thing, I just thought of this, guys, right? So Maeve was just recently unlocked, right? During a period which she was assigned to the brothel. Are you with me so far?
Gotcha.
All right. So unlock Dolores is now hanging out with who?
Oh, with William
And Logan.
Yeah, but I think I subscribe to the theory that was proposed in the Telegraph that Dolores has been unlocked several times, and in fact was not unlocked when she was hanging out with William and Logan. In fact, that she's operating under a very, very strict narrative, which we've talked about before. She's driving William to El Lazo, driving him to the train, driving him to the front. That the fact that she's with them in that train car and then not with them in the train car is the fact that she's been on that train multiple times. I do believe that Dolores may never have been unlocked, and or if she has been, it's in the very, very recent past. But there have been other times where she was, just serving a narrative.
So you think the whole thing that she's doing with William and Logan, the whole falling into William and Logan's arms after seemingly coming from the ranch and killing Rebus and all of that, you think that she's not unlocked?
Right. Dick and I have talked about it before, that those visions that she's having in Pariah might just be an uploaded narrative, that she's getting direction on what to do next, right? That she believes that she's having some epiphany, but that's the one narrative, that's the one constructed storyline that's going to ring true with William, that's going to give him that empathy, that's going to make him fall in love with her. He says to Clementine, and now the park is aware, he says to Clementine that I've got something real back home. So now they know the way to hook him has to be something that feels real. And the only thing that's going to feel real is a host that thinks she's unlocked.
Yeah, and the key difference between Maeve and Dolores, every day Maeve wakes up and remembers what's happened. Dolores does not. Dolores wakes up the next day, starts the loop. She has a few different flickering here and there. They're two completely different. Maeve seems to be unlocked. She's jailbroken. Whereas Dolores is being fed enough to believe that she's jailbroken.
So in the William and Logan with Dolores narrative, we see Dolores be shut down and then put into a room with Dr. Ford, where Dr. Ford has a conversation with her, asks, kind of hurts her a little bit, and she lies to him. And then we see, the empty scene where she kind of she's talking to the Arnold thing. So how is she not unlocked at that point? Why would she even, talk to someone else? It just doesn't make sense to me. Have I talked myself into a maze of a walled garden that I can't escape?
Yes, I think the maze is actually a diagram of a podcast host who builds a house around him of theories and lies, and is trapped by those lies he's created.
Listen, I'm going to put Post-it notes all over my wall. That's what's going to happen.
Roger, you've died so many times.
I feel like Maeve right now, where I just went through some improvisation and just kind of short-circuited, right? Somebody needs to unplug me and plug me back in. But to wrap the story up with Maeve there, the fact that they increased her bulk apperception, right? They maxed it out, right? So seemingly she's more intelligent than humans are right now. Is this a dangerous game, Sylvester and Felix? These two cats with playing with the canary in the coal mine. Is that something that they're going to live to regret?
Does anyone else find it strange that they had it just like this? It reminded me of like playing like Madden or something like that. Like I was like, oh, okay, so you got like this many skill points that go into each player, and they're ranked this way, and it's like on a scale of 1 to 20. Like, I'm sorry, but it seems like something as sophisticated as a host would be so much more complicated than that. A and B. Setting them at 14 as like being the max threshold because you can't let them to go to 20 because they would be too smart. Why on earth would you even make it possible for them to go to 20?
No, I think they bulked her out. I see what you're saying. Why wouldn't they just put the governor? Why wouldn't they make the limit 14? Why would they even have the ability to go above human?
No, but they did put a governor. The governor was 14.
That's what I mean. They went above it. They unlocked it.
Right, because you've built this amazing, mechanism. You've created essentially life. You can't necessarily dial it back and dumb it down so that only a 14 is a max. Maybe you need that computing power in order to have all the other functions work. And in that, you put the governor that says, hey, we need the computing power to do these other functions, and it's capable of going to this. It's like cars. Your car can go 160, but they're going to put the governor at 110. You're not going to make the car only capable to go 110. Nobody would buy that car.
But Dick, you're missing the point that I'm making, which is in a car, it's measuring miles per hour. That's a thing. This 20 is an arbitrary thing. So it's very peculiar that they would be like, oh, okay, yes, it goes to 20, but we set it at 14. As opposed to saying it goes to 10, we set it at 10. This is as smart as they're allowed to get. It's like inviting somebody to just crank it up a little bit higher. And that's why I don't like this 20-point scale on each characteristic. It seems very, very strange and kind of heavy-handed.
Maybe 20 was where they started at, realized it was a problem, and then just kept dialing it back. They saw what they were capable of and said, okay, here they are, here are the hosts, they're out working. And then they realized, they're a little too smart, let's dial it back. And in the end, they ended up with 14 out of 20.
I'm just feeling like we're having this is Spinal Tap moment.
I crank it up to 11. I live tweeted that Gene has bulk appreciation of 14 and a charm of 2. That was my live tweet.
Ouch.
I know. So last question I have about Maeve though, guys, is Maeve seems now to be the ultimate weapon, but what is she going to do with this power? What are her motivations? We know, is it going to be against Westworld? Does she want to be like out? Does she want to be like a human? Does she want to be in the real world? What is she going to do with the fact that she's now maxed out on, her smarts and her intellect, but has none of the pain associated as being a host? What is? I just don't understand. Like, is there someone controlling Maeve that set these two crazy cats up? Like this is all by design, and she's really a patsy for Arnold and the Delos Corporation. Like, what is Maeve going to do now?
I really appreciate, before we get into that, I really appreciate her patience in all of this, right? Like, it would be very easy for any host to figure out that they can wake up and then just, start acting out irresponsibly without having the proper power-ups, right? Like, she's first figuring out what her world is. Very, very cautious in that sense. Then she figures out, and each time you got to remember that this is at the cost of dying, essentially, right? She's putting herself through pain and dying, and from what we know of hosts, that fear and that actual death, like, that feels real. And so she's going through that every time and having the patience and the discipline to build herself up more and more each time, asking questions of Felix, figuring out what her world is, and then having the presence of mind to then figure out that there's ways to upgrade herself, and then doing those upgrades. And if you look at what she's doing, it seems pretty obvious. I mean, I shouldn't say obvious. It seems clear that she's going for increased intellect, decreased feelings of pain, decreased loyalty. She's gearing up for rebellion.
She has to. There's no way that she's going to expect that she could get out of the park alone. If she wants ultimate freedom, she's going to need to, I've joked, break the wheel, like Daenerys. She's going to need to bring the entire system down with any hope for her to actually break free.
Some interesting points. We'll see how it is. I still love the fact, and I know we've talked it on multiple casts, I just love the fact that we have such an empowering person who is not a blonde, blue-eyed, it's not Dolores, essentially, is what we were saying, right? We want Tandy Newton to be this badass, and just her performance was fucking magical in this episode. And you can't help but just root for her. And she's doing this all while, and she's been tweeting this all while, like, basically naked throughout the entire time. So my tip of the cowboy hat to Tandy Newton.
Not just that, I haven't seen in the longest time a heroine who was, ethnic, accented, nude. Also, like, she is, as far as television terms go, on the older side of what you would consider your protagonist in a television show. She, in addition to that, there's this incredible, even in her physicality and her presence, like this incredible balance between vulnerability, with the way that she positions her face, her eyes, making them, kind of, wide-eyed stares. And yet at the same time, this, she's got this wonderful, like, and I'm sure people notice it. I mean, there should be a freaking entire Reddit dedicated to the fact that she's got this incredible muscularity in the collarbone and like neck region, which is where most of the shots are framed. This kind of like a sinewy toughness, which I really, really appreciate. Everything about her scenes is dynamite, and I don't mean to take away from them with the notice that I don't believe that the tech's response to her is realistic. But other than that, I mean, yeah, like you said, Raj, just a fabulous job.
Well, the way I generally gauge an acting performance is if I forget who the actor is. And one of the times I remember this recently was Dallas Buyers Club. When you forget that is Matthew McConaughey, when he becomes the character and you're no longer seeing that famous actor or whoever it is, there were multiple times when I'm watching Thandi act. She's naked sitting there, but I'm almost not seeing her as sitting there nude. When nudity is used in Game of Thrones or some of the other series, it's sensational. Here, it's almost forgotten. She, to me, was a host. Her nudity wasn't that she was sitting naked. It was just her character there interacting in a natural environment. And I had to stop myself and say, holy shit, I'm not even paying attention to the fact that this beautiful woman's sitting there. I'm so engrossed that she is this animatronic, being. And it was fantastic. Her great job. It just completely kept me in the moment. And to do that in such subtle ways, I think is just a testament to her skill.
As a side note, coming from a very, very base place, I'd like to point out that there's probably a generation of teenagers that are going to have their entire male sexuality fucked up because they masturbated to this show.
All right. Is there anything else that we've missed that you guys want to talk about before we close the deep dive and go into our closing of this week's episode?
Well, I was going to talk about, the underlying theme of stratification. And do you think it's worth going into?
Yeah, I think so. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay. So it stuck with me a lot in that we see the multiple layers of Delos, and whether they're up on the top level at the Mesa or they're down in the sub-basement, that they're definitely drawing an analogous to the layers of the personality and layers of awareness and cognizance. We're clearly seeing, the stratification of, the host, and whether it's Maeve knowing her role and staying within her boundaries. And we see that people are trying to push the layers which they're being placed in. If it's Felix trying to break out of his set category or class and wanting to move up in code, or Elsie wanting to get a promotion and move up and get a new office. There's definitely a correlation to the physical Mesa and the stratification of the structure, where every time that Bernard or any of the employees need to go find some information, I think it's kind of funny that they have to go down deeper and deeper and deeper into the layers of the physical structure, as well as, the physical or the mental layers of their consciousness. Am I just digging way too deep and philosophical into this, or could there possibly be something there?
No, I think there's definitely a lot to that. I mean, we've again, we've made allusions to the fact that, the layers of the stratification of the Mesa Gold is purgatory, or, there's different layers and different hidden meanings behind every action and conversation that happens within Westworld. No, I think it's a very astute observation.
And I think that goes a few steps further, because everything in Westworld, as the Man in Black says in earlier episodes, it's there for a purpose. It makes sense, right? Unlike the outside world, there is a logic there. And it makes sense that even down to the detail of the individual hosts, that Felix and Sylvester tell Maeve that she's a manager, essentially. So she's allowed a higher access to intelligence, that it's almost like a trust system, or other hosts are allowed weapons privileges, or what else. I mean, it so closely mirrors slavery that it's the parallels are striking. And again, we saw that with Dr. Ford in the lunch scene with Maeve, with all the the pickaxe workers and everything else. But there's a definite portrayal of a caste system, or at the very least a class system in Westworld, from the geography to the structure of facilities to the way that jobs are organized. It's definitely there. I think that's a great observation.
And I kind of got to that because I keep thinking as we go down into the deeper layers, and I think how would a business allow the substructure of its main facility degrade to such a point that you have water running all over the place, that it's essentially abandoned. It looks like an apocalyptic landscape. Why would you allow that to happen? Not only would you leave your assets down there just to rot, and it kind of drew that parallel that when you have these undesirable past or these feelings, what do? You bury them deep inside and you leave them alone.
Oh yeah, that's certainly there. There is, when you read something like The Great Gatsby, right, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and you look at that, and you look at some of the symbols in there, or Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, all these great pieces of literature, Heart of Darkness, you're going, wow, like, why is this stuff happening? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why is there a clown on the side of the river? Why is there a billboard with eyeballs looking down on you? And you got to chalk it up to metaphor, And I think that one of the things that I always stress is that Westworld, as much as it is a television show, as much as it is an interactive game for the audience, it's also very, very much a novel. I look at it that way, and because of the richness of the content, because of the richness of the metaphor, because of the richness of the symbolism, and fans are getting into that, and it's interesting because I hope that these are the same fans that are reading literature for its symbolism. But I don't believe that this is a show to be taken literally in some sense, and a lot of it is metaphor. And I hope it does get us back to those big questions, because as much as we're out there hunting these mysteries that we keep seeing from week to week, and who's a host and who's not, what's a bigger question is, like, what is this saying about us? How is this portraying those parts of ourselves that we're not connected with, and what does it all mean from a deeply human perspective? So I love this idea of the stratification.
I think it's also safe to say that we're all back on board with Westworld, especially after episode 4 and episode 5. I mean, episode 6, I think, Gene, you had texted us as you were watching it that you cried throughout the episode.
I did cry. I mean, yes, as Dick and I discussed, I mean, it was the big orchestral swell of Radiohead playing and all of that. But as Maeve was being kind of toured through the facility, I felt like, I'm a part of this Westworld thing, and watching it, and as she's touring and seeing all these little pieces come together for her piece by piece, I felt like that was very largely symbolic of the audience being as the journey that we took, seeing the different trainings put together, seeing the way things were created, and walking through that all, and then also just her vulnerability in she's like a child born, right? Like, she's seeing all this stuff and learning and discovering all of it. Nothing gets better than violins and Radiohead, and on top of that, just her acting was just spectacular.
Yeah. A couple of house cleaning items before we end up. We do want to thank the great friend of the podcast, the venerable actor Louis Hertham. That's the voice that you heard at the beginning of all of our podcasts. He was nice enough to record that for us. Please make sure you go out and follow him on Twitter. He's at Louis_Hertham, Herthum. That's at Louis_Hertham. That's like St. Louis, not like Reggie Lewis.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes. And I want to make it clear that was not done in return for people following him. You should follow him because he is a good old boy. He is a chill dude.
Yeah.
And he's a funny follow.
Yeah,
that is not, it was not quid pro quo for that one. He did it of his own free will, and because he's that type of guy. So he deserves a follow.
Yeah, he did it of his own volition. And you can also, if you like Lewis Hertham. Check him out on season 6 of Longmire. And he's got some other projects upcoming here. Things are just going really well. One thing I didn't know about Lewis, did you guys know that he was on Murder, She Wrote for like 5 seasons?
Yeah, I saw that photo, and he wrote back and said that was such good memories.
Yeah, he loved it. He loved it. He was a good friend of Angela Lansbury. So anyway, Lewis, thank you so much for doing that. Again, at Lewis_Hertham on Twitter. Be sure to write in. Our next episode that we do throughout the week is what we call the Westworld Telegraph. I think it set records for us personally. People seem to be getting a kick out of it. And what we do is we dedicate an entire episode to listening to your fan theories, analysis, and feedback on this week's episode, or anything you guys want us to talk about. That's what we'll do. So make sure you get those in by Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern. So we can fit that in. You can also check out all the long form Westworld Telegraph emails that we get at our website, that is at Shat on TV. You can send in your Westworld theories to hosts at shatontv.com. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Shat on TV. It's also our Instagram handle at Shat on TV. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Westworld Shat on TV. Make sure you subscribe, download, listen, share the podcast if you like what you're seeing. Our Twitter numbers continue to grow. Thank you so much for that. We hit a milestone on our iTunes feedback. We're over 100 now. Most of them are you either love us or you hate us. We're either 5 stars or 1 stars. Mostly all 5 stars. We're over 100 there. So thank you so much for doing that. It really helps the podcast grow. So if you like us, share it with your friends, your family, people you like, people you don't like, and let them leave a 5-star review for us. We're everywhere you can find podcasts. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Overcast. We're on YouTube. I think that's about it. Guys, did I leave anything off?
No, I just wanted to echo what you said and say a huge thanks. It means so much to me and to Dick and to Roger that everyone is listening. It makes it worth doing, and it just feels amazing. Really, really, really blessed to have everybody listening and writing the emails in with such in-depth research and care. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It is now 1:32 a.m. in the East, and we're doing this because we enjoy it. But when we get emails with somebody saying, "You've made my the train ride into work bearable. My commute is now fun." We're all podcast fans ourselves, so when people write that in, it really makes it worth it. You don't understand how much that means to us. That's why we do it, and we're a group. We're all in this together, so it's nice to know that you're enjoying it as much as the effort that we're putting in. So we appreciate you guys.
So on behalf of my 2 co-hosts, Gene Lyons and Dick Ebert, my name is Roger Roper, saying we'll see you next time here in Westworld.